The lies keep coming. I have never in my life seen so much misinformation being broadcast with such apparent enthusiasm. I spend much of each day trying to understand what we're being told and why. But the mysteries arrive faster than the explanations. There's a good deal of misdirection, a good deal of exaggeration, much sleight of hand, a good deal of psychological warfare stuff, and many attempts to blind us with a small part of the story, to exaggerate in order to influence. When I was a medical student, I ran a nightclub in the city where I was studying. The club was in a pretty rough part of the town, and apart from having a disc jockey to play music, we showed upside-down Buster Keaton films on the ceiling and occasionally mixed them up with colourful histology slides, which we also projected on the ceiling. It was the histology slides which got me into trouble when the BBC mentioned them in a broadcast about the club. The medical school dean was not amused, and I acquired a large black mark as a result. Although quite a lot of students attended the club, there was a hardcore of youths who would make the roughest and toughest of today's statue-toppling Black Lives protesters look like kids on a Sunday school outing. Most of them carried knives, and they weren't afraid to use them. And it was, I'm afraid, a rare evening when there wasn't a large puddle of blood on the floor. Most of the time, the kids with the knives were decent enough with me, and I didn't have any problems with them. But then half a dozen new ones turned up and were spoiling to make their mark. They got a little feisty with their knives, and although I wasn't cut, I was allowed to take an uncomfortably close look at some of the fairly intimidating pieces of steel which they carried. So the next day I went into the city centre and bought myself a stick. It wasn't an ordinary stick, however. It was a sword stick with a long, very pointy blade hidden inside it. In those days you could buy and carry a sword stick quite legally. The following evening, when the boys with the knives gathered around, there was much jeering at the stick I was carrying. Until, that is, I pulled the first 1.5 feet of the blade out of the stick. It was, of course, a considerably larger blade than any of those that the boys were carrying. This was a couple of decades before Crocodile Dundee. The effect was instantaneous, and so was the respect. The knives were put away and they never came out again. I would never have used the sword, of course, but they didn't know that. The existence of it and the implied threat was enough. It was a crude and simple psychological trick to take control of the situation. And that's what governments are now doing. They're using every trick in the book to threaten us and to keep us terrified and awed. Some of the tricks are very crude, some are fairly subtle. They're using the sort of tricks used to defeat a real enemy. Our own governments are using the same sort of tricks which we used in World War II. But this time they're not using them on the Nazis, they're using them on us. And the tricks and the lies keep coming because they're working. Our own governments, which are now our enemy, are doing everything they can, and they're succeeding in terrifying a good chunk of the population. They're doing so not because of the science, but for political and commercial reasons. Politicians are obeying the principles of Agenda 21, more of which in a future video, and they're trying to satisfy the commercial requirements of an industry which sees a bonanza payday tantalizingly close. Yesterday, I saw several tiny children wearing masks because their parents had obviously believed the nonsense. One child, no more than 4 or 5 years old, started to cry when her mask slipped. She was only comforted when the mask was replaced. And I saw 2 motorists alone in their cars, driving while wearing masks. The truth, if that is still considered acceptable, is that masks can cause hypoxia and damage brain function. It won't be long before drivers start having crashes because they're wearing masks. And why are small children being forced to wear masks? There's no scientific point in it. Why does no one in government point out that the virus is so small that it will zoom through mask material like a fly through chicken wire? A large car park run by the council was still shut yesterday, but it didn't much matter because there weren't many people about. Many of the shops which should have been open were shut, some obviously permanently and some shut because staff didn't dare to return to work. Coffee shops were open only for takeaway coffees and nobody seemed to be buying. We went into a restaurant, mostly empty, and they happily served us coffees, pleased to have a couple of customers buying anything. The official estimate is that 0.03% of the population of England have the virus. Can you imagine how likely it is that you'll meet someone with the virus, or that you'll catch it, or that it will do you serious harm? And am I the only one to see the irony in the fact that just last year in Britain, a man was fined £90 for wearing a mask while walking past a facial recognition camera put there by the police? It's odd how things have changed so quickly and so conveniently. Last year, Hong Kong banned masks to stifle public protests. Laws banning face coverings in public have been passed in France, Belgium, Austria and Denmark. In Canada, rioters who covered their faces with masks risked 10 years in jail. And in America, some states have had laws banning face coverings since 1845. The laws were put in place to try and get rid of bandits. Cressida Dick, the police commissioner for the Metropolitan Police in London, has said that the police will only enforce the law on wearing face masks as a last resort. "My hope," she is quoted as saying, "is that the vast majority of people will comply and that people who are not complying will be shamed into complying or shamed to leave the store." I'll repeat that. My hope, she is quoted as saying, is that the vast majority of people will comply and that people who are not complying will be shamed into complying or shamed to leave the store. How nice of her. Cressida Dick should know all about shame. She was, of course, the officer who made the decision for the police to shoot at a young, innocent Brazilian man in 2005. Police apparently shot 11 times from close range. They managed to shoot the entirely innocent man 7 times in the head and once in the shoulder. "I think about it quite often," Dick allegedly said last year while chatting on a BBC programme called Desert Island Discs. "Quite often? Most people, I suspect, would think about it pretty well all the time." I suspect I am not alone in thinking that she should have been sacked then. Instead, she now has a top police job and believes that those choosing not to damage their health by wearing useless masks should be made to feel ashamed. I'm not entirely sure that encouraging other shoppers to shame non-mask wearers is entirely within Ms. Dick's role in the police. And does this surely damned woman, I use the word damned in its Christian sense, not realise that the government has made it clear that people with health problems, including anxiety, do not have to wear masks, and nor do young children? Is she suggesting that these individuals, who may be fearful for many reasons, be deliberately shamed? Are the police suggesting officially that patients with respiratory and heart disease be deliberately shamed? Is Dick suggesting that those with mental health problems be shamed? So it would seem. My utter contempt for Cressida Dick is endless. We should call en masse for her to be sacked. Write to your MP, write to the newspapers. If you do nothing else today, do what you can to get this woman fired. She is an utter disgrace to the human race. I cannot believe it. Encouraging people to shame sick and the frail and the anxious and the mentally ill, and shaming children. It is said that masks are being made compulsory not to protect against an infection, but to provide reassurance for people who are too terrified to go into the shops. It seems that the World Health Organization may have reversed its view and decided that masks are necessary because of political pressure. From whom? Was it Gates, now about to be the World Health Organization's main sponsor? Is the plan to keep us terrified until the vaccine is ready? But the masks are not giving confidence, of course. They are increasing the terror among the people who fear that we're living in a plague year. I shall certainly not be wearing a mask, of course. In many of the shops which I saw open, there was a real sense of terror. I got stuck at one point on the wrong side of a barrier designed to keep pedestrians in two lines. I moved a barrier just enough to squeeze through, and within seconds a guard had appeared from nowhere. He shouted at me, and when I ignored him, he started screeching excitedly into his portable radio. I have no idea what he was saying or what he thought was going to happen. I went into several shops to try and buy a top-up for my ancient mobile phone. No one would sell me one. In one shop, a masked cashier, whom I could hardly hear, he was also sitting behind a plastic screen, started to sell me a top-up voucher when a manager rushed over screaming, "No top-ups, we don't do top-ups." Why on earth not? What did she or her bosses think might happen? Anyone who talks glibly of a V-shaped recovery in the economy needs to get out into the shops. I'll be surprised if there are many high street shops left in the UK by Christmas, and things are getting worse everywhere. Pensions will be devastated because many companies have stopped paying dividends. Everyone who doesn't have a job and a pension with the state will be financially disadvantaged. The state is using over £1 billion of taxpayers' money in the UK to act as a patron for the arts, though it's difficult to see why the arts and the suffering celebrities shouldn't suffer, make do and be creative to find their own way out of the manufactured crisis. Meanwhile, an estimated 250 million people around the world will lose their jobs, largely due to the lockdowns which followed Neil Ferguson's slightly hysterical, in my view, and inaccurate forecasts. The ensuing poverty will create pain and illness. And the disappearance of high street shops is, of course, part of the plan. This isn't paranoia, it's Agenda 21 from the United Nations. I've been reading yards of material about the plans they have for our future, and to be honest, it's terrified even me. This is, of course, all part of the global reset. It's not been kept a secret, but they've slipped the plan past most of us, and they've sold it falsely as a solution to non-existent global warming, the second biggest scam in history, and an excuse for the awful things they're planning for us. The misdirection has been skillful. Governments have made life complicated and unpleasant and threatening in order to distract us and blind us with a threat which doesn't really exist. Doctors and nurses have been forbidden to counter the propaganda, and most have sadly obeyed their orders. Governments have persuaded millions of half-wits to worry about climate change, and also racism and sexual politics, of course, when these are not the main danger we face. The spoiled elitists who are trapped in their own concept of history and have energy to waste on worrying about Cecil Rhodes and so on should try looking forwards rather than backwards. We're heading for global slavery, organised by the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and a bunch of unelected billionaires. The risk for our future is very real, and it is a horror coming to your family and your home. The protesters have, in my view, missed the big picture, and, misled and lied to by governments everywhere, they dismiss as a conspiracy the truly frightening elements of the global reset they have got planned for us. I know some people won't believe any of this, it's all too much for them, but let me leave you with one threat that you can easily check. Part of the global reset is a plan to combine all religions together into a new world religion, which may or may not be called Chrislam. Chrislam, an attempt to combine Christianity with Islam, has been around for some time in a very quiet sort of way, but it's now progressing rapidly. Pope Francis, the first Jesuit pope, announced that May the 14th is to be World Chrislam Day, and he's said to have appointed 13 Chrislam-friendly cardinals. Last year, the Vatican released a Chrislam logo for Pope Francis. I wonder if it's a coincidence that churches may now be open but are not providing services. Oh, and just put Chrislam and ex-British Prime Minister Tony Blair into your search engine. Or take a look at the Tony Blair Faith Foundation and the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change. Blair launched his Faith Foundation in 2008 to work towards global faith. Blair said then that extremists who did not want to join together would be put, and I quote, into retreat. Close quotes. What did he mean by that? I don't know, but I've seen the film of him saying it. Later, Obama got involved, and in 2012, the Vatican called for one world order and a global government. The constant excuse was that we needed a global government and a global church to protect us against climate change. Oh, and guess who can be found amongst Blair's list of partners? You won't guess if we sit here all day. Or maybe you will. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And Microsoft. It's all there, out in the open. Take a look. If you don't believe me, just look. The United Nations 21 plan is for a world government, with population control near the top of its agenda. The excuse for this? Climate change. The United Nations also says that we obviously need a world church. It seems that individual religions will disappear into one. What will happen to Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, Methodists, Evangelical Christians, Presbyterians? Do any of us have a say in any of this? Before we know what's happened, the United Nations will have given us its world government and its world church, whether we like it or not. That's what the climate change campaign was all about, preparing us for a global reset. And that's what the coronavirus nonsense is all about. Check it out. All the information is available on the internet. I've given you all the clues you need. This is definitely, most definitely, not a conspiracy theory. The only conspiracy is the one leading towards a world government and a world church. Oh, and think about this. In 1991, the Club of Rome published a book entitled The First Global Revolution, in which it admitted to inventing climate change as a common enemy of mankind in order to unite the world. 1991. It really can't get any clearer. Finally, before I stopped receiving emails, simply because there were too many, I saw several complaining about the sound quality of these videos and not surprisingly offering kind help with new equipment and professional advice. Well, thank you, but no, I'm not interested and don't have time or energy for upgrading our very top-level equipment. We use my old iPad, a microphone that cost under a tenner, and a cheap camera tripod, and anyone who wants better sound quality will have to go and watch something else, one of those. I'm told those videos about skateboarding gerbils are pretty good sound quality. And my genuine thanks to YouTube, who have, after I protested, put back my video entitled Face Masks Ending the Confusion. That probably took some courage on their part, so thank you, YouTube. Thank you for watching An Old Man in a Chair, and thank you for all your support and encouragement. Please copy and share the videos on Twitter, Facebook, BitChute, and any other platform you can find. If you'd like to put on a translation, that would be fine. If my videos disappear, please go to my website, vernoncoleman.com, to find out where you can possibly see them, or to read the transcripts, because the transcripts of the videos, including the banned ones, are on the website. This channel hasn't been monetized. I haven't authorized any adverts or any sponsorship, and there never will be any ads or any sponsorship, and there aren't ads or sponsorship on my website either. If you'd like to see more videos, please subscribe to the channel, because the videos aren't always easy to find. If you visit mainstream media, please put on messages asking people to come and look at the videos, because this is where the truth is. Although it may feel like it at times, please remember, you're not on your own. More and more people are waking up, and we can win this fight. Thank you for watching.